we just have a little bit left to finish up here. So the last couple of bits with this theme of resurrection and sacrifice that Dickens develops is that France will be resurrected. So the hope is that France might also be resurrected through the sacrifice of all these prisoners, all these people who are being sent to the guillotine. The whole point of this revolution is to create a rebirth, to create a better France. It comes at a terrible cost, a huge sacrifice, but Dickens ends hopeful. On page 352, let's all turn there. On 352, the seamstress is speaking to Sidney Carton. About halfway down the page. "Plots," she says, "though the just heaven knows that I am innocent of any. Is it likely? Who would think of plotting with a poor little weak creature like me?" The forlorn smile with which she said it so touched him that tears started from his eyes. "I am not afraid to die, Citizen Evrémonde, but I have done nothing. I am not unwilling to die if the Republic, which is to do so much good to us poor, will profit by my death. But I do not know how that can be, Citizen Evrémonde. Such a poor, weak creature." So the seamstress here is saying that she is okay with dying, again, sacrifice, if it can bring about a better France, resurrection. She's not sure that's the case because she sees herself as this poor, weak creature, but Dickens is suggesting that maybe out of the horror and wreckage of this revolution, maybe it is justified. Maybe something better can arise. And Carton's prophetic last speech, everyone turn, 372, also connects to this hope that France can be reborn. So, first full paragraph on 372. He makes some prophecies here for some of these characters. "I see Bursard and Cly, Defarge, the Vengeance, the Juryman, the Judge, long ranks of the new oppressors who have risen on the destruction of the old, perishing by this retributive instrument before it shall cease out of present use." So he's predicting here that these characters will also be sent to the guillotine. So Dickens has shown us here in this text that the oppressed have become the oppressors. But what he's suggesting here is that vengeance only leads to more vengeance. Hatred only leads to more hatred. That if you turn to this desire for vengeance, to this desire for bloodshed, then you yourself will become the victim of it. And we saw that earlier with Madame Defarge, who ends up dying. And we see it here with these characters who Dickens tells us will also die by the guillotine. So Dickens is telling us here the only way out of the cycle is through forgiveness. The only way to break this violent, bloody cycle is to let go of the past, to be willing to forgive these horrific sins of the past in order to move forward, which obviously is very hard to do. Okay, he keeps going. "I see a beautiful city and a brilliant people rising from this abyss. And in their struggle to be truly free, in their triumphs and defeats, through long years to come, I see the evil of this time and the previous time of which this is the natural birth, gradually making expiation of itself and wearing out." So he's saying here that eventually France will rise up, will be reborn. These past times of the revolution and the past times of the abuse of absolute monarchy and aristocracy will be forgotten, will be laid to rest, will be worn out, and France will be better. Now, he also suggests on 372 that Dr. Manette will be resurrected and returned to himself. So remember, he has yet another relapse at the end of the novel. He loses his mind after Charles is re-imprisoned and sentenced to death. On page 340, he's frantically searching for his shoemaker's bench because he's become unhinged. "I cannot find it, and I must have it. Where is it?" Receiving no answer, he tore his hair and beat his feet upon the ground like a distracted child. So his inability to save Charles from execution sends him back over the edge. But on 372, in Carton's prophecy, he says that Dr. Manette will be restored to sanity once more. So we've got some hope for the future. Okay, one last really important thing that I want to emphasize, and this connects to the beginning of the novel, where Dickens tells us that this time was so like the present time, the time in which he's writing, that there are comparisons that can be made. So the whole point of Dickens writing this is to warn people. He wants to warn society that what happened in the past can happen again.
Yeah.
If changes are not made to society. And he has been using throughout this metaphor that what you sow is what you reap, right? What you plant is what you will grow. And if you have this society of social injustice, this abusive government, this society that mistreats its poor and lowly, then that is what you will create. You will create a society that can only understand social injustice, that can only understand abuse and hate. And he gives us this dire warning on 367. He's taken us on this journey where we've seen the horrific things that the revolutionaries have done. And Dickens has not shied away from their violence, from their bloodshed. But he wants us to still understand that to some degree, and this is very arguable, but to some degree, what they are doing is justified. And he brings it back to this at the very end of the novel. Chapter 15, page 367. He says, "Along the Paris streets, the death carts rumble hollow and harsh. 6 tumbrils carry the day's wine to La Guillotine." So remember, these tumbrils are the carts, and the wine here is the blood of the victims who are going to be sacrificed and killed at the guillotine. He says, "All the devouring and insatiate monsters imagined, since imagination could record itself, are fused in the one realization, guillotine. And yet there is not in France, with its rich variety of soil and climate, a blade, a leaf, a root, a sprig, a peppercorn, which will grow to maturity under conditions more certain than those that have produced this horror. Crush humanity out of shape once more, under similar hammers, and it will twist itself into the same tortured forms. Sow the same seed of rapacious license and oppression over again, and it will surely yield the same fruit according to its kind." So, the violence of the Reign of Terror is the result of oppression. And if society continues this way, then surely another violent uprising will be the result. What you sow is what you reap. What you plant is what you grow. And he uses this comparison here of the soil, of the leaves, the roots, the sprigs, the peppercorns growing to maturity, that people are just like plants. And if you plant them in bad soil, in oppressive governments and social injustice, then they will grow into these tortured forms. All right, guys, I'm going to do a slow scroll here through the end. We've already talked about Carton's prophecy, but I just want you to see here the particulars of what he is suggesting is going to happen in the future to all these people. And then our chapter titles, many of which we've already talked about. So I'm just going to do a slow scroll so you can see. All right, the only chapter title we haven't talked about yet is 15. The Footsteps Die Out Forever. So we see with this title, Dickens is suggesting the end of the revolution in Lucy's life. So keep in mind that when the novel ends, this is not the end of the revolution in France. This is not the end of the Reign of Terror. That continued. This is simply the end of the revolution in Lucy's life. Remember, all the way back in chapter 6, Hundreds of People, Lucy talks about the echoes of the footsteps and how it is representative of this violent uprising that will be coming into her life. And so when Dickens says the footsteps die out forever, it means that this violent uprising in Lucy's life, in the Manette's life, in Charles Darnay's life, is coming to a close. So she and her family are now free and safe. And echoing, right, footsteps, is also connected to the theme of double. So Dickens is suggesting here the footsteps die out forever, the death and end of the doubling with Carton, who has sacrificed himself for Charles Darnay and this family. All right, guys, I really hope you enjoyed this novel as much as I have. It truly is one of my favorite, probably top 5 novels of all time, and one of my favorites to teach. It is so beautifully written, so complex, so thoughtful, and just really a great read, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I have. And I'm sorry that we weren't able to discuss it in person together, but I'm glad that we were able to at least talk about it this way. So if you guys have any questions about it, feel free to email. We would love to discuss it with you.